Okay, everybody. So, welcome back. We are starting a new section today, and this one's going to be focusing on some revolutions again, a little bit. Mostly that's just today, as well as new changes that are coming to the political arena. We touched base on it a little bit last time, talking about Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna and all that, and that is the issue of nationalism. That's going to be a real big part of today and the following two lectures. All right. So let's go ahead and dive on in. All right. So the growth of nationalism. For those of you who do not remember, nationalism is a belief that your country is like the best one, that the people's greatest loyalty should be to not to royalty, not to a person, but to the nation, to like that group of people who have a shared culture, a shared history. So, like, people are proud to be French, not because of the kings they've had, but because they're in France. It's where they're from, because they are the French people. Just pride in who you are, in what your nation is, in your ethnicity, basically. It is helping give people that sense of identity that people like long for. And we're going to see with this growth of nationalism, pride in who your people are, you're going to see a lot of people wanting to form their own land, their own nations. So that's going to be popping up during this time that we're going to talk about today and over the next two lessons after this. All right. And what's going to stimulate the growth of nationalism? Uh, National pride, obviously. We're also going to have economic competitions like it's us against them. And democratic ideas are all going to play a part in this because that's people working together for the greater good of a nation. So if you want your nation to do well, you kind of have to have pride about it. Now, continuing on. Now, European rulers over the previous hundreds of years are going to win and lose lands for many reasons, as we see here, marriage, wars, treaties, alliances, just deals of all sorts, right? So territories and the people in them are basically traded back and forth. So, like, when we were talking about the absolute monarchs, remember Frederick the Great of Prussia and Maria Theresa of Austria? They fought over the territory of Silesia, which is basically between those two. So when Frederick the Great's Prussian forces conquered Silesia and took it away from the Austrians, the people living there no longer subjects of the Austrian Empire, they're now subjects of the Prussian kingdom. So the people who are being traded back and forth, they're not exactly liking that. They want to have their own identity. Now, in 1815, we're going to start seeing some of these changes start to come about. So Europe has several empires and a lot of nations. Our major empires are Russia, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire. And a bunch of nationalist leaders are going to attempt to unite and win independence for different groups. Two of the more successful ones that we're going to be talking about later on are Germany and Italy. All right, so the 1800s, the 19th century, is going to be just full of just nationalism, like this rising sense of pride in one's country and one's background, the history of the people, the culture. It's going to get, by the end of the 19th century, to toxic levels. And as you'll see, like in future classes that we have, it basically leads to World War One. And we will definitely be getting into that later. And as we see here, it also helps lead to the Congress of Vienna because remember, nationalism was a big part of Napoleon Bonaparte's popularity while he was in charge of France. Now, Congress of Vienna We are seeing a widespread of demands for political rights, and these rights are going to lead to revolutions and legislative actions. So, discontent in Europe is going to be happening. Italy and Germany, especially, they have been the playthings of other nations for a very, very long time, and they're getting very sick of it. So, 1848 is a very, very important year in European history. A number of unsuccessful revolutions during this year are only going to amp up the nationalism movement that's going on and the tensions that they can cause. Revolutions are going to take place in France, Italy, Austria, Prussia, as well as other nations that we don't really talk about too much. Now, even though they're unsuccessful, they're going to show that the middle class is rising in prominence, in power, in different nations' societies. All right, 1830, liberalism and nationalism start breaking out of the conservative hold on Europe. So, like in France, we have Charles X, he's overthrown and replaced by his cousin Louis Philippe, who was from the upper middle class. So, a commoner has been made king, essentially. Belgium is going to become an independent nation. Poland and Italy are going to attempt revolts to basically throw out like outsiders, foreigners who are ruling over them. But Poland's revolt is crushed by the Russians, and Austria crushes what Italy is doing. So it doesn't exactly work out. France is going to stir up some trouble again. They tend to do that from time to time. Economic issues in 1846 are going to make things very difficult, and King Louis Philippe is going to refuse to make any changes that would actually be beneficial to the country. So that means he's going to be overthrown for a little bit, and a Republican government is going to be established. And by Republican, I mean it's like a republic system where there are like representatives in the government for the people. And during this short lived government, there's going to be universal male suffrage. So all men in France are going to be able to vote. That's a pretty big deal. And we're going to have these things called workshops. Not like it's a seminar that people are going to, but they are basically places that are established by the government to get people working and like rebuilding the country, basically getting everything moving. Kind of like their version of the New Deal, like what we had in the United States to get us out of the Great Depression. Now, the government is going to go broke. And yeah, so that doesn't exactly work out. And it's going to cause a bunch of rioting for 4 days in the streets of Paris and other cities in France, resulting in thousands of people getting killed and people going to prison in Algeria, because Algeria is a African territory that France is in control of and will be in control for a very long time. And they're tied so closely together that it's almost like Algeria is a part of France. All right. We're going to see elections held for president, like the first president in France, essentially, and that's going to be Charles Louis Napoleon being elected. And yes, he is the nephew of that Napoleon, Napoleon Bonaparte. Right. Other revolutions in Germany. There's going to be a lot of protests and rebellions that are going to break out in the German Confederation, including parts of the Austrian Empire, because part of the Austrian Empire actually is in the German Confederation. It's going to be stressing pan-Germanism, basically the idea of uniting all German people together into one country. It's going to show popular discontent, which is like, hey, we're sick of this system. We want to make a change. And that's like the majority of people wanting that. All right. They pretty much want to work on forming their own nation. Austria and Italy, there's lots and lots of ethnic groups that are present, especially in the Austrian Empire. You have Germans, Czechs, Slovenes, Poles, Serbians, Albanians, Croats. You have Transylvanians, Romanians, Hungarians, Slovaks. There are many, many people there. So that is just a powder keg waiting to blow. And in northern Italy, there are some territories that are having some issues, like who's going to control the territories of Lombardy and Venetia. All right. And all of these revolts that are going to happen in these areas of Austria and Italy, they're all going to fail as well, like within a year. Now, the UK, basically England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, that is United Kingdom. We're going to see some things happening there. So, very different from what's happening on the continent. And this is during the reign of Queen Victoria, known as the Victorian Age, the Victorian era, whatever you want to call it. It's basically the last 2/3 of the 1800s. Now, we're going to see a lot of political rights being expanded on, and like through law. Queen Victoria, she's going to rule with morals in duty, promoting honesty, hard work, and respect. Like these are qualities that all British people want to live by because the Queen is like the perfect example of this. Middle and working class people are feeling confident in themselves. So if you have these people who are feeling good about themselves, they're going to be more productive. It's going to mean better things in store for the country, for the nation, for the empire. And by 1860, Great Britain begins to transform the government from a constitutional monarchy where the king and queen would still have power to parliamentary democracy, where the king and queen are basically just figureheads that don't really hold a lot of political power, and all of the powers in like the prime minister and the parliament, the legislative body, like their version of Congress. All right, this should be our last slide for the day. Now, the working class, a lot of improvements are also coming to the working class, such as labor unions. These are groups that fight for the rights of workers so that they are not being abused, being underpaid, losing their job because they got sick, things like that. And during this time also, especially the early part of the 1800s, slavery is going to become illegal in the British Empire. And they have colonies all around the world. So 1807, they first abolished the slave trade. And then in 1833, they banned slavery everywhere in the empire. So that's all steps in the right direction, and it all happens with the British. All right, that is where we're going to end today. Be sure to do the work for this lesson and come back next time where we're going to start talking about Germany and Italy.